morning in the summer of 2023, I had a mild pain in my abdomen, well, right here, that I remember just brushing off as probably being due to my belt being too tight. By that afternoon, this pain had reached a level I've never experienced before. It was as if I was burning alive from the inside out. My fiance rushed me to the hospital while the pain just crashed through me in waves. And by the time nurses were taking my vitals, I was screaming in agony and sobbing for them to just make it stop. Can you believe I was actually asked by a nurse on a scale of 1 to 10, what was my pain level? After a few doses of morphine and several rounds of tests, I was told I had inflammation that was in line with Crohn's disease. My GI doctor later officially diagnosed me with Crohn's, and I was set up with a treatment plan. This diagnosis terrified me, to say the least. Not only did I barely know anything about Crohn's, but when I told a few people about my diagnosis, they either responded with their own horror stories they had heard, or some thought that it meant I'd just be running to the bathroom more often. Spoiler alert, it's way more than that. I stopped talking about it because of this. Fellow Toastmasters, today I'm going to shed light on Crohn's disease and not only give you an idea of my own personal experience, but talk about what it is, the symptoms it causes, how it's diagnosed, and the treatment options that are available to people. According to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, in America alone, this disease affects 1 in 100 people. With this in mind, I've decided that this is something I need to talk about. So let's explore how this invisible illness impacts lives, how it impacted my life, and how hope shines through in the form of medical advancements and understanding. What is Crohn's disease? Let's start there. It's a chronic condition that falls under the category of inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. It causes inflammation anywhere along the gastrointestinal GI tract, from the mouth down to the anus, though it most often affects the small intestine and the beginning of the large intestine. What sets Crohn's apart from, say, irritable bowel syndrome is that Crohn's is an autoimmune disorder. The body's immune system attacks the gastrointestinal tract, which causes inflammation. This inflammation can occur in patches, leaving some areas healthy while others are inflamed. There is a misconception that Crohn's is a hereditary disease. So like when I told my family about my diagnosis, their first response, my dad especially, was like, "You can't have that. We don't have a history of that in our family." On the contrary, there's actually not known what the exact cause of Crohn's is. Researchers believe it's due to a combination of genetic predisposition and overactive immune response and environmental triggers. It's not contagious, but it is life-altering. Living with Crohn's, especially untreated, can feel like your digestive system is always at war. There were signs for me beforehand. I do have a lot of intolerances, so I always thought that it was due to that. Like I had too much dairy, or I just ate something off, and then the ER flare-up happened and proved to be more. The exact symptoms can vary widely between individuals, but often include abdominal cramps and pain, diarrhea, loss of appetite, low energy, and fatigue. In severe cases, it can lead to complications like a stricture, where the intestine it narrows. And that can cause blockages, which in turn requires surgery. I do have a stricture, but they were luckily able to widen it. So that was good. What makes Crohn's particularly tricky is its unpredictability. Symptoms may flare up for weeks or months, followed by periods of remission where life feels normal again. This roller coaster nature can take a toll both physically and emotionally. It did on me, and it still does. After my first ER visit, and while I was working with my GER doctor to figure out what was going on, I managed my flare-up by eating a very bland diet. It was depressing. Not gonna lie, it was fucking depressing. I'm sorry. Because food had gone from comforting to fear-inducing. Like, what my favorite things could cause that pain again. And I never wanted to experience that. A positive during all of this was my fiance found ways to cook some of my favorite meals using ingredients that didn't cause reactions. He managed to make pizza that was completely gluten, soy, tomato, all the bad stuff for me free, and it tastes awesome. We still make that pizza, and that is why he's my fiance, one of the main reasons. Diagnosing Crohn's disease isn't straightforward because its symptoms overlap with other conditions, such as, like I said, IBS or even infections. It requires a combination of methods to pinpoint, like your doctor looking over your medical history, general physical exam, blood and stool tests to check for inflammation markers, imaging tests like CT scans, MRIs, or specialized X-rays to detect areas of inflammation in the GI tract. The ultimate test is a colonoscopy or endoscopy. That's where the doctor goes directly and looks into your GI tract to actually see what's going on. So that's after my ER, where they did the CT scans and the tests. My GI doctor scheduled me for a colonoscopy, and that's how I got the official diagnosis, when they were actually able to see the areas of inflammation and confirm it. Getting a diagnosis often involves persistence and patience. I'm lucky in that it took only a few months between my first flare-up diagnosis and starting treatment. Unfortunately, there are many people with Crohn's that describe years of misdiagnoses before finally learning what they were dealing with. I actually met someone who it's taken her 6 years. She knows she has it, but she's still struggling with doctors. There's no cure for Crohn's disease, but there are ways to manage it and improve quality of life. The treatment strategy usually depends on the severity and the location of the disease. There are anti-inflammatory drugs like corticosteroids that help control inflammation. There's immune system suppressors that reduce immune activity to prevent flare-ups. There's biologics. These are cutting-edge treatments that target specific proteins involved in inflammation. Like for me, I'm taking the biologic Skyrizi. It was recently approved in 2023 for use in Crohn's management. So it has worked very well for me, thank goodness. There's also lifestyle adjustments, like working with a dietitian like I did to figure out a better diet, exercise, stress management can all help in managing the symptoms. Despite this, in severe cases, complications can happen and surgery will need to be done to remove damaged sections of the intestine. And even that, Crohn's can still reoccur elsewhere. About half of people with Crohn's undergo surgery within 10 years of diagnosis. Despite the challenges, treatment advancements over the last decade have given patients more options and better control over the disease. So I'm very hopeful that more and more options will be available so that this doesn't have to be something to be afraid of. Now, there are a lot of resources out there, but the best resource is going to be the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. Going to their website, they have all the information, goes into detail about medications, symptom descriptions, and helpful groups to go to for support and the like. So let's continue to share knowledge, spread understanding, and work towards a brighter future for everyone living with Crohn's illness. Thank you.